song, and this will be our year. Took a long time to come. Don't let go of my hand now, the darkness has gone. This will be our year. Took a long time to come. And I won't forget the way you helped me up when I was down. And I won't forget the way you said, darling, I love you. You gave me faith to go on. Now we're there, and we've only just begun. This will be our year. Took a long time to come.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Independence Podcast End of Year Show. Before I introduce the guests, I'm happy to say that they've been decontaminated from the neurolinguistic programming that the SNP has been conducting on the public, if you've seen this story recently. And they've been conducting that despite the fact that it's a completely discredited pseudoscience that has no basis in fact whatsoever. My first guest today is Kathleen Caskie from Women for Indy. How's it going, Kathleen?
It's going well, Michael. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Bit of a cold, but that's normal at this time of year. The second guest we've got is James Maxwell, a journalist for the New Statesman and many other places. How's it going, Jamie?
Very well, Michael.
The final guest today is Pat Kane, who I don't think needs much more introduction other than saying he's Pat Kane from Thoughtland and Pat Kane. So, how's it going, Pat?
My NLP is kicking in. SNP good, Green good, Rise good, SNP good, Green good, Rise good. Rise good, Green good, SNP good. Sorry, shall I stop?
Yeah, well, it is actually a pseudoscience, so I think you might just be inventing that.
That was maybe pseudo evidence, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, so I think we can go on to the first big story of the year, which is basically something that's been continuing throughout the year, which is the Labour Party, which there's been a hell of a lot going on there. And the year started with John Murphy and John McTernan here to save Labour, Scotland and possibly the wider universe. And I'm not sure that quite worked out for them. But where should we start with Labour? I'll go to Jamie first. It's been a pretty tumultuous year for them.
It's been a tragic year for Labour in some respects. I mean, it's easy to get nostalgic and sentimental about the collapse of the Labour Party in Scotland. It's made harder by the swaggering manner with which Jim Murphy and John McTernan and the old right of the Scottish Labour Party swaggered back up to Scotland and reasserted their control of the party, boasted about how they weren't going to lose a single seat to the Scottish National Party in the May election, boasted about how easy it had been to outwit the Scottish government, and then failed in the most spectacular manner imaginable. And then after that, following the May election, one of the most disheartening things, I think, about politics in Britain this year has been the response, not so much of the right to the election of Jeremy Corbyn, but of progressive opinion south of the border. The complete contempt and hostility with which The Guardian and others have treated the rise of Jeremy Corbyn, the complete lack of understanding about why he had so much support within the Labour Party has really been astonishing. So it's been an incredibly difficult year for the Labour Party, and it ends the year as divided as ever, really.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things with both the McTernan and Murphy thing and with the Corbyn thing was the role of the media, because in Scotland we saw the media totally attempt to lionise Jim Murphy. He's our saviour, he's coming here. And then Corbyn's been totally demonised down south, as you said. So, I mean, how did you feel about all of this, Pat, the way the media played it, both in Scotland and at the UK level?
Well, I wouldn't be the first person to say that Project Fear has probably been, the reprise of Project Fear is probably one of the biggest stories of 2015, and not just in terms of the response to Corbyn, but in the way that a Project Fear, meaning a media establishment complex, rose up to try to intimidate the Greeks in the referendum. So I think Scots were watching the Greek referendum, we were watching the Corbyn thing with a degree of déjà vu. And simply watching the way that the establishment is quite, as Owen Jones wrote about in his book, is actually quite clear and discernible in the UK at the moment. You can sort of see their moves. They're not really hiding it. And it's obviously the question of how we react to it and identify it. I mean, the Labour Party in Scotland has utterly imploded. And I think it's a fascinating example of how you can lose credibility by just not having any evident integrity at all. I mean, the McTernan Murphy charade, they're running up and down the sides of the Clyde in his Scotland top, and And every bit of this, his performance in particular, Murphy, who went from being on the right of the Labour Party, holding up his nuclear weapons submarine in his promotional picture, someone who just has no really connection at all to the vital energies in Scottish politics, coming up and posing in a series of classic sort of Scottish Labour Party left-wing poses. No one took it seriously, and the electorate could not have delivered a more thudding verdict. And the recent polls with the SNP show that no matter what they try to attack the SNP on in terms of their governance, it's simply not going to work. I think they're in an absolute death spiral, and I think they'll be gubbed completely in May. And then I think we're in a very interesting situation in terms of the Scottish left, generically conceived. I think we will be in a kind of Podemos-type situation. I don't know who takes up the mantle. I don't know how it's going to work out in terms of the list vote in 2016. But I think the Labour Party is on the verge of being absolutely finished in Scotland. And they deserve to be. They've treated people with absolute contempt, and they've treated their electorate with absolute contempt. And they deserve to go down, and I think something else deserves to come through and take its place.
You're being quite harsh there, Pat, to say that there's no integrity left in the Labour Party. I mean, I think Kezia Dugdale, I think, is a woman of integrity. Whether she has the experience and the authority to lead the party, I don't know. But I have to say she's very personable, and certainly on issues of gender and so forth, she's been committed. But to go back to Jim Murphy, it's really interesting that you clocked on that thing about him, running up the side of the Clyde and the nipple-chafing old Scotland talk. He misjudged it. So I thought it was like watching, what was that TV programme, Life on Mars, about the cop that went back to the 70s? There was an element of that about Jim Murphy. He didn't realise that Scotland had moved on. He was doing the old football. And it was quite interesting.
Don't forget the Iron Brew.
And the Iron Brew. The women for Indy group at the East End, they were one of the first ones that said to me, they were like going, why does he want to bring Bevy back to football matches? That's a dreadful idea. And he didn't seem to realise that in many ways Scottish politics had become, if not more feminist, certainly more feminised. He was giving it the old hard man, Labour, and it really didn't work. It felt very, very, very old-fashioned, and he completely misread the mood of Scotland, utterly.
It was I think the Scotland Talk moment was a beautiful crystallisation of how badly Murphy had misjudged how radically Scottish politics had changed. He seemed to think if he waved the flag as aggressively as he possibly could, working class, left-leaning, former Labour voters would come flooding back. And that's really not what is happening in Scotland. And I think it had been explained carefully by a number of people over a number of months running up to the referendum. But as soon as Labour concedes that identity is not the core motor, it's not the fuel driving Scottish political debate, they end up intellectually completely lost and confused. And I mean, I suppose they're there anyway.
Oh, I'd say so. One of the particular issues that they seem to be extremely confused about, and I'll go to Kathleen first with this one, is the nuclear issue. So we've got this remarkable situation now where the Scottish leader is for it, but the Scottish party is against it. The English leader is against it, but the English party is for it with the renewal of Trident. I mean, this is a total shambles.
It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. If you can't have a coherent line on the defence of the UK and you're a UK party, it's clearly nonsense. And it's so nonsense that nobody even talks about it, because that shows how written off, in fact, is the Labour Party in Scotland are. Because if you ask somebody, say, about their nuclear, everyone goes, yeah, well, of course it's nonsense, but who cares, because nobody's voting for them anyway. It would be like if, I don't know, the international Marxists of the world had an incoherent line. It would be amusing, but of no real import. The only people that still give any credence to the Labour Party, I think, are the media, and that's a bit of a poisonous link, the way that the media and the mainstream media, the MSM as we call it, I really don't think people on the ground have... I think they're laughing at the Labour Party now, and it's a shame. It's a shame to see a once proud party brought so low, I think.
That said, Kathleen, I agree with you with regards to Kezia Dugdale. I think since becoming leader, she's at least tried to strike the right tone. She seems to understand that the first job of the Labour Party in the run-up to the May elections is simply to get people to listen to them again, to not slam the door in their faces when Labour Party activists come around canvassing. I think I agree with Pat. The likelihood of Labour making any progress in May is extremely slim. The likelihood of them collapsing entirely is quite high.
And the likelihood of them
but
going to canvass is quite low because they've only got a few hundred activists left in Scotland.
Yeah, well,
but the thing about the nuclear about the recommissioning of Trident, no, as I don't think we should. I mean, it's obviously it's one peril in a string of perils that say the SNP and maybe the broader Yes movement, if it becomes reanimated, are looking at to sort of hold their hands out to the electorate and say, you voted no, look what happens. So without a doubt, the Eurovote might be one of those, might be or might not be one of the things, but certainly the recommissioning of Trident, the utter spectacle of the division of the Labour Party, the clear unanimity of the SNP and other parties alongside them. I mean, I don't think we can underestimate after 30, 40 years of broad, deep, wide activism in Scottish life, the sense of the door being shut in your face, the sense of a hand being held up to progress that will come about when this missile system is recommissioned. I think it will send deep tremors. I presume in the direction of a second referendum, and I think this is a really important moment for the independence movement, because if we don't take the utter disappointment and the utter crush of this and redirect that annoyance into anger and passion for some new process towards a new settlement, I think a lot of cynicism might set in. I mean, that because I think the struggle. I mean, this. I'm speaking quite personally. I came into independence politics partly for independence in Europe and partly because I wanted to absolutely implacably oppose nuclear weapons in Scotland. So I don't think we can underestimate what it'll do to the quote unquote collective psyche of Scottish life, and I think we have to be ready to channel that disappointment when it happens, because I think it will happen. I don't think dispiritingly, I think it's going to be recommissioned. I don't think there's any chance it's not going to be.
The process of recommissioning has essentially already started. They've already spent a number of £1 million on the very early stages of the second generation. And it's a foregone conclusion now, it seems, with a Tory majority, another deeply dispiriting moment in British politics in 2015, that Trident will be renewed.
One of the things I like to see CND do, the commentary around this issue of Trident tends to focus on, international scenery. Are you for it or against it? Deterrent. But the CND do a thing which is really quite direct and to the point, and it seems to work. They just post photos of nuclear trucks driving through towns in Scotland. And do you think that's quite an effective way to wake people up to it? I mean, a lot of people are against it in Scotland, but there are still some people that are, I don't know, I don't care. That thing that CND do, where they actually put the photos of the nuclear convoys going through the different towns. Do you think that's a way to make people much more engaged on the issue?
I think if you look at any of Rob Edwards' stories in the Sunday Herald over the last couple of years, there's a basic environmental case to be made about the presence of these leaky, creaky monsters in our environment. The actual possibility of a meltdown has been possible at many points over the last 20, 30 years. Eric Schlosser, the American critic who wrote the book Command and Control about nuclear weapons in the West, has a whole chapter devoted to Scotland's nuclear weapons and how close to disaster that we've actually been. I think there's a join up between CND and the environment movement myself. I think we have a strong argument to get them out of our conurbations and out of our central belts, which is where they are.
I actually think, when they drive the trucks through and you see the pictures in the dead of night going through your city, and I live in Glasgow, we would be obliterated. I think that is a superb tactic. It brings it home to people in a way that the abstract debate doesn't. And that's one of the things I think we've learned from the independence referendum, is that you can't talk high politics. You need to show people what's on their doorstep and what matters. And I certainly always share those photos of the trucks going through. It hadn't dawned on me that the trucks were going through my city in the dead of night until I saw the photos. And once it dawns on you, it is quite horrifying.
The debate over Trident is of enormous practical and symbolic significance to people who are already very engaged, and it registers more broadly too. I don't think it'll be the trigger for a second referendum or a yes vote in a second referendum. It's part of the broader sense of alienation, disempowerment that Scots often feel, but it's not the key defining issue in the argument.
Okay, so to move on to our second